I started getting into Gary's whole world, started following really closely, and then that's how I actually found out about like VaynerMedia itself and got the internship. And it was way a longer game. The idea initially was get an internship at Vayner, turn that internship into like a real full-time job, and then in like 3 years, I'll figure out how to work with Gary.
This is the We Make Success Happen podcast.
This is the We Make Success Happen podcast with Matt Callanan.
This next one is an amazing video I was sent about a guy called Matt Callanan.
An amazing and inspiring soul who goes by the name of Matt Callanan.
Hello and welcome to We Make Success Happen. Today with amazing human, Babin.
My man, how are you?
Direct from New York. So you, former creative for Gary V.
Yeah.
Gary Vaynerchuk.
Did the creative director thing for G for a while, and now kind of experimenting with Adobe.
Yeah, you're now an Adobe creative resident.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean then?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one of those things that's really hard to explain in a lot of ways because it sounds too good to be true for the most part. Essentially, the Creative Residency was a project Adobe set out about 5 years ago to work on, and they wanted more community outreach. They wanted to see how creators in an earlier stage of their career were using the softwares and how they could just collaborate on a bigger level. And so they started the Creative Residency, which every year they pick a small handful of creatives all around the globe and give them a full year to pursue whatever creative project they want, which means taking out the stress of financials and things like that. You basically become an employee of Adobe for the year, but you get to pursue only the things you actually want to pursue.
So what have you done? Because do you start in April?
I started in May of last year. So it's kind of crazy. I blinked and the entire thing went by. And so now it's almost over, which is sad and exciting and opens up a whole new sort of chapter of challenges and things like that. But yeah, I've been making videos, I've been experimenting. And that's, what's interesting is I was thinking about it the other day. It manifested completely differently than what I actually predicted it to do. When I was leaving Gary's world, I was like, cool, I understand how to make massive amounts of content, how to do it quickly and edit like a good quality. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to make a million things and it's going to be great. And then whenever I actually left the job, I realized, wow, there's a lot of conversations I need to have with myself that I've never had before. I've been sort of on autopilot. I've just been creating and creating and creating. And now it's time to actually take a step back and learn what I want to do with my life and what my voice is and the stories I want to tell. And so I tweeted this thing the other day, but to me, it feels like chapter 1 of my life was Gary V, right? It was learning how to do all the things on a technical level. Chapter 2 with Adobe was me being able to do like a lot of soul searching and figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. And then chapter 3, I think, is where like we really get to see everything sort of come together. And I understand now coming out of this residency, the things I want to be making, the series that I want to really pour myself into, and ultimately the content structure I'm going after that fulfills both something inside me that like makes my life happy and I think provides value to people on the outside.
So what have you discovered about yourself then in this year?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is as the complexities of social media and things like that continue to grow, I have noticed sort of a massive sort of shift in transparency. And I like that we're actually becoming a much more transparent society. We're talking a lot more about mental health and balance and what it means to actually be a creator. And that even though what we're doing in a lot of ways, I mean, it's like it's a Monday and we're recording this conversation and that's awesome that we get to do that for a living. But it's a lot of work. It's not just running around having fun. And so being able to shed a little bit more light on that is really exciting. And for me, I think I want to help sort of create a blueprint of sorts for the next generation of creators to understand you actually can do it. I grew up in a really small town in North Florida where the idea of being a creative I was laughed out of the room. I remember my senior year of high school, my history teacher was like, look, Tyler, it's great that you have all these hobbies, but when are you going to get realistic? And that just never made sense to me. I was like, no, there's a way for me to do it. And that required me sort of going a very untraditional route and leaving school and things like that. But ultimately, I figured out something that works for me. And I think so far it's working pretty well. And so if anything I can do to sort of shed light on what that process was like is what I think I want to do.
Yeah, what would you kind of say to sort of shortcuts getting to where you want to be as a creative?
I mean, first and foremost, like shortcuts don't exist. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing is, there's kind of this, I think, we put this idea of like a pedestal of like dropping out of college and things like that right now, this whole entrepreneurial movement. But that being said, like it would have been cool if it worked out the other way. Like I wish I would have been good at school. It would have made everything substantially easier. I had to work way harder, I think, for the first few years of my life just to prove myself, to get my foot in the door, because people wanted to sort of say that I wasn't actually working hard because I didn't check the boxes in the way they wanted me to. So definitely don't go the shortcut route. And I think at the core though, and the thing that my sort of whole ethos, I think I kind of wrap around is starting from a place of actual passion in what you're working on and enjoying that. It's one of the biggest lessons I took from Gary is, Gary will always say like he wants to buy the New York Jets, but it's less he actually wants to buy them. He just wants to try and buy them. It's the process of trying to do this thing because he gets to play the game every day that he likes to do. For me, it's kind of the same way. I know what I want to be making, but that being said, like if I get to live my life every day and create videos as a job and I get to live a little bit more on my own terms, that's success. Like I'm happy with that. Yeah.
What do you actually prefer the best then out of creating maybe art direction or photo or video?
It's funny. I always make the joke that I've been trying to figure out what to like put on LinkedIn for 2 years. And I have no idea.
I think no one's figured it out.
Yeah. I don't actually know what I do for a living. At the core, still photography will always be like the thing that started everything. That has a very special place in my heart. And it's actually something that I've gotten really disconnected from over the last couple of years. And I have some projects this year that I want to really reconnect with just me and a camera and like going and creating images. So that's first and foremost, still photography will always, I think, kind of have the anchor of everything. But I'm really excited because I get to kind of be a jack of all trades. A lot of times I can step in and do art direction. I can step back and do creative direction, and I can sort of direct. And if I need to pick up a camera and go shoot the project, I can do that too. And that's the thing that to me is so exciting about the current day of being a creator and like a maker, as I would call it, is that you can do everything. Therefore, if I get bored with one section of my life and creativity, I can always adapt and go into something new. I'm currently going through this whole process of wanting to do like a big reinvention on my whole brand, sort of exiting the residency and figuring out what that next chapter is. And so now I get to sort of pick out all those different things that I like doing, figure out what my strengths and my weaknesses are, and then fully invest all into my strengths so that I can build out what the next chapter looks like.
Yeah, what do you think the next chapter is then?
No idea.
Really?
No.
You must have a
clue.
few ideas.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the immediate question is everyone is always asking like, so what are you doing like day one after Adobe's no longer paying you? What's the route? Yeah. So I've been really fortunate over the last year to build out a lot of relationships with brands and stuff like that. And during the residency, I tried not to take on a lot of brand integrated work and pursue everything sort of on like a more passion basis. That being said, luckily I have a good sort of client list that's ready to go in terms of wanting to do sponsored content and things like that. And so that you'll notice like I'll start doing a lot more like ad posts and my social and stuff like that, because that'll be kind of the immediate switch. But I don't know. It might manifest as a really small agency with myself and a couple other friends sort of doing our own thing. I might decide I want to go back and get a job. There's been some really cool opportunities to come on as like a senior creative for some cool brands that I think are aligned with my own values. So that could be a cool route. I sort of made a deal with myself at the end of last year that I wasn't going to try and think about the next chapter as much as I could up until like 2 weeks before my residency's over, which maybe is a risky thing of like not planning too much in the future, but I think that everything will align. I would rather put as much energy into what I'm actively doing right now than to pull any energy away from that and like start planning on what plan B is, if that makes sense.
What's the best thing you've done in this year then with Adobe? I saw you just went to Paris quite recently, didn't you?
Yeah. I went to Paris for the weekend, which was cool, and I got to I recreated one of my favorite YouTube videos of all time while I was there with Casey. Yeah.
Was the whole video idea just so you can try and get?
You know what's
24 hours with Casey?
So funny? No, not at all. It was actually I just wanted to go make the video. And so I made the video, and I was in my hotel back in London editing, and I exported it. And I was it was uploading to YouTube, and I was like, oh, you know what would be a great idea? If he sees this, maybe I can like throw in an ask at the end.
Yeah.
So I canceled the upload.
You did actually cancel it, though.
I canceled the upload, went back to Premiere, and added that ending text of asking him if he wants to come on 24 Hours with. And that's a way longer play. Like I have met Casey a handful of times, and I really want to do a 24 Hours with him and expand on sort of the new chapter of life that he's entered. But I don't, there's going to be a lot of asks, I think, that build up to me getting that one.
It's good idea though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Playing the long game.
I think it'll be cool. And it'll also it'll make it way more fun in a lot of ways. I think whenever we actually end up doing it, because I think it's more of just a matter of when than if, it'll be really cool to look back at like the first time I tweeted him, and then the first time like I made this video, and then whatever else I do in between now and getting him as secured as a guest will be a really fun sort of process to look at. And again, that kind of almost, goes back into this like creating a blueprint and showing other creators how I'm doing it. Like I obviously I have connections to Casey and stuff that I could use if I wanted to, but I'm trying to go I like the gritty route of finding out how to do it kind of for myself.
Do you like that kind of long game then?
Yeah, that's really exciting to me.
Why is that?
Every time I've ever achieved like any goal in my life, the next day I've been really bummed out, which sounds strange. But
because it was too easy or something?
Not that it was too easy, but it's that I really love process. Like I have the process tattooed on my arm over here.
Let's have a look at that.
Yeah. It was one of the first tattoos I got in New York. And it's because I remember like the day I got on Gary's team after I had been an intern at VaynerMedia and I had sort of gone through this process of moving to New York. I remember the first day I went and sat down at my desk on Team Gary. I was like, oh, so this is it. We did it, what's the next thing going to be?
Yeah, okay.
And so for me, I'm just so obsessed with the things in the middle, which is ironic because I definitely lean too much into eagerly wanting to get to the thing. Right. Mm-hmm. So I would love if my phone buzzes right now and Casey says, cool, come to LA and let's do 24 hours. But I know that right after that video is done, it's like, oh, it's done. The goal's finished. That
almost sounds like disappointment.
It's not disappointment. It's just that every time I accomplish something, I look back and I realize I was happier whenever I was fighting for the thing. I always want that fire in my life to be chasing something down. The moments in my life where I don't feel is happy or satisfied are the moments in between big projects and in between trying to accomplish certain things.
The journey.
Yeah, that's everything for me.
It almost sounds like the last page of a book. Yeah. And it's like you don't want to get to the last page of a really good book because you know it's over.
Yeah, you want it to keep going.
So did you honestly think when you were in VaynerMedia, Gary V's office on the first day, you were like, right, okay, what's next? You were almost thinking, right, what could I achieve next?
Yeah, no, 100%. That was definitely on my mind. I remember the exact feeling that day. Not to say I wasn't happy being there. And I mean, I stayed there for 3 years. So I loved every day of it. And that's whenever you have to find out different goals inside of the goal you achieved, right? I can't work that hard to get the job and then quit the next day. So I had to kind of adapt and figure out what I wanted to accomplish inside of it. It's things like this cover and different campaigns I got to work on inside of VaynerMedia. Those were the next goals, the next benchmarks of success I was trying to go after.
Now you kind of talked about being a creative and doing lots of different things because there is some train of thought, and I'm not with that kind of train of thought, that you should only do one thing really well. What would you kind of say to those sorts of people? Yeah,
I remember growing up in Florida, right when I started photography, that's what everyone told me. They were like, find your niche, get narrowed in on that thing and just pursue that. And I think there's a lot of value in that. I know I'm way too distracted in my life to ever do that, though. I need a million things going on or I start to kind of freak out. And so there's a photographer in the US in Nashville. His name's Jeremy Cowart. And he does a lot of music photography, but he also does fine art and things like that. And the thing of looking through his portfolio was everything's so different. He'll do he'll do super fine art, clean fashion portraits. And then the next day he'll take a picture on a Polaroid camera, light it on fire, scan it, rephotograph it. It's so different and wide. And I always kind of looked at him as sort of a guiding light of pursuing sort of whatever you want. And he said something really interesting that I think about almost every day. And he's like, the thing that connects work is that you created it. So it doesn't matter if I draw a picture on the table right now or I walk outside and take a picture. I made both of those things. And so that is enough of a connection for me to say like, cool, this is the body of work I'm making. Circling back, way harder to do it that way. You know, it would be like if I wanted to become the best person at taking pictures of red flowers, it would be way more easy to like find my path there, I think. Yeah. And then it's another thing. I remember it's funny. I don't watch much of Gary's content anymore. I've like kind of disconnected with it.
You carried out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I always like, I'll pop in and see stuff every now and then. But yeah, I think, and Gary will say this too, Gary has like 7 or 8 core values that he really believes in. And he sort of just talks about them in different ways, in different contexts and applications. And so I think once you have a good understanding of those 8 values, you don't have to like watch every single video anymore. And so that's kind of, and like, I just listened to him for 4 years, like in my headphones. So like, I know what his voice sounds like. Even though I miss him to death every day. But yeah, he said this one thing where it was like, whenever everyone wants a niche, but you actually can go super broad. And the thing that is your niche is you. Like at the end of the day, you're the person connecting all these dots. And so even though I do have so many different creative outlets, whether it be photo or film or directing or like whatever it may be, I'm okay with doing all those things because ultimately I'm trying to build up who like I am. And I think that at some point, there will be a tipping point where it's like, okay, we can hire him to do this thing. And even though he's like, again, the LinkedIn joke, we're not really sure what he does, we know that he can accomplish this thing.
So how hard was it trying to get that position with Adobe, becoming a creative resident? What was that kind of application process like?
So I wish I could say it was harder than it was, because in a lot of ways everything sort of fell together very naturally. It seemed like it was like supposed to happen the way it did. I was in India for one of my best friend's weddings. We were sitting on sort of his family house, and I was there with all of my like VaynerMedia employees, and we were chatting. And I, in my last sort of 6 months of Vayner, I knew that the clock was ticking, that something had to change. I was just becoming a little bit burnt out in that environment, and there wasn't a lot of room for me to grow anymore. I sort of felt like things were a little stagnant. And so I'm just like scrolling through Instagram, and I stumbled across the residency. Like I got hit with like an Instagram ad to apply for it. And I had just, a couple days before thought like, how can I get a brand to essentially sponsor me to just like pursue whatever I want and then do some sort of like high level brand integration. And so when I saw the Adobe thing, it just felt like the perfect next step. And during my time at Vayner, there were tons of job offers and people were trying to steal me and things like that. And nothing just felt like intuition's very, very important to me. Like I just know if I'm making a right decision or a wrong decision with how it feels in my gut. And as soon as I heard about the residency, I was like, yep, that's it. Like that just makes sense that's the next thing that I'm going to go do. And so kind of ran home to New York, made my proposal, which essentially was 24 hours with. It was originally pitched a little differently, but 24 hours with is how it manifested. And then the interview process was intense. I mean, it's, 4 phone calls, and then you fly out to San Francisco for 8 hours of interviews during the day, and then you fly home and there's 4 more phone calls, and it's a long process. I think that is, and anyone who's listening to this who aspires to want to do the residency, Adobe for the most part is very hands-off during the year. They kind of let you sort of do your thing. And so there's a lot of investment in the early stages to make sure they're picking the right people. That matters a lot to them because they don't want to come chasing you down to be like, why aren't you posting on Instagram or whatever it may be? And so it was an intense interview process, but it was all very fast. I mean, between applying to the residency and quitting my job at Vayner, I think was less than a month.
Okay.
It was very fast.
How do you know as a creative when it's time to move on to the next project or the next job?
For me, it's intuition. I wish I had a better answer of like a technical, like this is the moment when like you can't go any further. For me at Vayner, I sensed that at least my time on Team Gary wasn't doing the thing I wanted it to do anymore. And that I was on that autopilot. Like I could make content, but it wasn't challenging me anymore. I knew how Gary functioned. I knew how the team functioned. And I just sort of felt like I was like floating in like equilibrium. And I never like that. I like things to sort of be in extremes. And so I told Gary that, and then I shifted out of Team Gary into a number of different projects throughout VaynerMedia, and I would still sort of hop into Gary's world when things needed to get done that like my skill set was aligned with. But I went to Vayner Talent, which is a whole other sort of like management arm of VaynerMedia. I directed some things there for a while. Gary started a wine company. I went and I was the creative director on that and created all the early stage content for it. And so I think whenever you're in that position, and if you're happy in the position you're in, I should say, you can explore every possible option in that system before stepping away from it. So I had like 5 different jobs inside of VaynerMedia before I decided I was going to leave it altogether. And that was me exploring like, okay, I've hit a dip in Team Gary. Let me make sure that there's no other possible place for me to find happiness before I decide I need to step away and go do something else. And that's because I believe in Gary and I loved that team and that company very much. And so I didn't want to just step away from it because, you know, even though things are going well, like there were of course negatives and things that have not been great that have come from leaving that job. And so exploring all of those options before stepping away, I think is the most important thing.
Do you think you'd ever go back and work for VaynerMedia or Gary V? Not
in the same way, but I would love to explore that. And I think Gary and I have a meeting coming up soon where we're going to talk about what we can possibly work on together. I definitely learned I don't function well in like a 9-to-5 environment. Having a specific office I have to go into every day and work at and then leave is not the best thing for me. I can do a couple days a week, but I can't do every day. And so going back to like a traditional director role at Vayner or any agency, frankly, for that matter, probably not how it'll happen. That being said, I want to work with Gary on projects for the rest of my career. You know, I want us to be able to do stuff, and everyone inside of VaynerMedia. If that company churns out so much amazing talent and content, like I want to be as involved as I possibly can there.
What's the thing that you're most proud of? And that could be a piece of content that you created.
That's a good question. I guess I can go 2 routes. My favorite thing that I've made in my time with the residency was an episode of 24 Hours with Jeff Staple, who that was a really special piece of content for me, even though it didn't perform overly crazy. Nothing dramatic came from that. But Jeff Staple, who's a designer in New York, was like the singular reason I packed up a bag and left Florida to New York. Like he was the guy I was following and convinced me to do it. And then to have left home, moved to New York, and then for things to have come full circle and for me to actually be able to create a mini doc on him that he was really excited about and like really loves was one of the most like creatively fulfilling things. But it's weird. It's something maybe I get this from Gary. I don't know. I've totally stopped celebrating wins for the most part. Like I always am kind of focused on the next thing. So
even micro, do you do micro celebrations?
Not really.
Really?
Yeah. And I've tried to get better at it. And I think I am getting better. I mean, if something cool happens, like I'll go out to like have a dinner with my friends or something. And we'll do like a micro celebration, I guess.
What's that down to then? Not wanting to celebrate?
I don't know. It was funny because when you asked me that, like, what are you most proud of? The first thing that came into my mind was like, I'm most proud of whatever I do 10 years from now. Like, it's just, I'm always kind of focused on the future, like that next
stuff
thing.
that hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah. Because I think it's natural for creatives to not like the work they're doing and stuff. But I always feel like I'm chasing, like I always make the visual of like I'm running down a tunnel and I'm trying to get to the end thing. And of course that we circle back to like, I never actually want to get to the end thing. I like the process of running and going. And so the whole celebration thing is like I said, like usually the day after I accomplish something, I'm kind of bummed out. Like I immediately want to start the next thing, you know, I don't know. That's just me.
Well, I think as a creative, I did a talk the other week and I was saying to these students, I said, as a creative, I probably only feel probably about 80 to 90% happy with everything that I put out. I don't know if I've ever got to 90.
Substantially less than that. Yeah.
Really? Why?
Yeah,
What
I've had to get better at like 30, 40%. I'm like, just ship it. It's fine. Because I think I especially like I'm way too hard on myself as a creative. Like there's no question. I'm fully understanding I am way too hard on myself. And I expect too much of myself in a lot of situations whenever often I'm like the sole person who's like creating everything. But yeah, like I never like my work.
Really?
I'm like never pumped with it. No. And I think a lot of times I will often get lost in the process. I mean, like 24 Hours with is a full day of recording, and then it takes 40 hours to edit. And I normally do that 40 hours straight. So it's like outside of, 6 hours a night that I'm sleeping, like I don't leave my desk for that 40-hour period while that video is getting done. And by the time I've spent 40 hours staring at the same video, I'm so over it. Like I don't want to ever watch it again. I just want to like put it out, because you get to a point where you can't even imagine what it's like to witness it for the first time again. And so it's always funny, like if an episode or a video gets a really good response, I'm like, this is so strange. Why do people like this? This is a terrible, terrible video, And it's something I'm trying to get better at. And I understand that it's probably not the healthiest way to approach things oftentimes. But yeah, I've become really okay with not liking my work, because I'm always pursuing like the next thing.
Do you use that as your driver then, do you think, to keep moving forward?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Cause I'm always aspiring to like what I think my work should be. One of my favorite photographers growing up, his name is Joey Lawrence. Does like a lot of documentary work in New York now and other like developing nations. And he said that, that was kind of like, you should almost like never be fully satisfied. It's cool to like your stuff, don't get me wrong. But if you're so excited and you think you're the best with everything you make, you're going to stop making stuff, because you're like, oh, whatever, I did it.
Yeah.
Like I want to continue pursuing, trying to become the best creative that I can be.
So can you take compliments then, or do you have a problem with compliments?
I have a super huge problem with it. I become like really uncomfortable. If I'm like at an event and someone comes up and compliments my work, I just kind of nod. I'm like, thanks so much. Like, I really appreciate it. Yeah. And then I'll try and change the subject quickly, because I don't do well with the like flattery thing.
Something I had to kind of learn is that compliment thing, that actually you got to be grateful, like show a bit of gratitude. Because I would do the same kind of thing. I'd like someone would say, oh, really enjoyed, I used to be a DJ, and people would like, love your set. And I still would be going, not quite sure. So you would kind of like bounce, you almost like reject the compliment, but actually you're doing them a disservice.
Right.
By not actually showing gratitude, like actual authentic gratitude, and actually accepting it. And actually I'm in my 40s, and it's taken me into my 40s to properly accept compliments, because I just feel embarrassed. I think there's something going on with the ego there. It's like, do I deserve that compliment? Yeah,
it's weird. Like I get tons of emails, and I'll get DMs and stuff, and people will talk about how much like a piece of content inspired them or like changed the way they're approaching things. And for like, I think it's almost like hard for me to believe it in a way. And that goes into the whole like being too hard on myself and sort of my own self-image and stuff that I'm working through. But I'm so grateful. Like the idea of me making a video just that was like fun for me to make, and it having any level of positive impact on someone's life is the greatest thing I could ever want to do.
How do you deal with that internal voice then?
For me, the thing I've come to learn in the last year, because the time with Adobe was the most downtime I've ever had, where I allowed pockets of downtime to happen. And I realized that is a super, super dangerous place for me. Not good. Like I should never be left to my own devices.
As in the downtime?
Yeah, the downtime of like, I'm a textbook overthinker. And so I should never be allowed to be like left alone in a room with my own thoughts. I go crazy, and I'll really overthink everything I'm doing. And so for me, I've learned, we were talking about like the next week of travel is insane. I'm so happy because I know I'm going to be so insanely busy and I'm going to make so much stuff, and I'm never once going to have to deal with the voice in my head. That to me is amazing. It's figuring out how to structure my day so that every minute is accounted for. And that doesn't mean like I'm going to be the last person who's ever like hustle culture, like work your face off until like you can't work anymore kind of things. I have tons of time where like I, relax with like my girlfriend and we watch Netflix at night, you know what I mean? But it's me making a conscious decision that like, cool, between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock is like, this is the time that I'm doing this thing. And I want to invest all of myself into that because then it cuts out any noise and any leftover voices in my head.
I think that's quite a common thing as a creative, isn't it? To just like keep busy.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of balance that between, the mental health kind of side of things, the chance of like burnout? Because if you're a creative and you're constantly go, 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 there is a chance that your mental health will suffer. Yeah. You might reach burnout, or you might stop being creative.
Yeah. What's funny is the idea of like, I get lots of people that reach out to me and they're like, burnout, how do I deal with burnout? And I hear a lot of people say like, oh, you only burn out if you don't love it enough. And I don't believe that. I think you can definitely burn out and like work too much. But I've noticed that a lot of times I can feel like I'm burnt out and like I'll like end a day and I'm like, I'm toast. Like this is it. And then like the most random idea will spark an endless sort of plethora of more creativity. And there's, there's this Maya Angelou quote, and it's like, creativity is not a resource that you can run out of. Like the more you use, the more you have. And I think that's true in a lot of ways, that it's super easy to get burnt out if you're on one project, but that's why you should be able to expand, and your niche should be you. Because if I'm burnt out, I'm making vlogs about X, Y, and Z, I can shift it and I'll make a documentary for a nonprofit or something like that. And that will re-inspire me in a new way. So I think you can only burn out in like one track, but you can then easily change lanes into whatever route that you want. Yeah.
So let's talk about didn't you get a one-way ticket from where you were in Florida to New York? Do you want to sort of tell us what your kind of thinking was to sort of make that decision?
Yeah. So I had been living in Florida my whole life. And like I said, I mean, Florida, especially my town in Florida, which was a very small sort of, there's only one way to do life, which is you do well in school, you go to college, you get your degree, and then you go on and you get whatever your normal 9 to 5 is, and you just live your life, and that's it. That never made sense for me. And so I was always kind of going against the grain. I always thought that I was going to leave and go somewhere that was a little bit more understanding on the way I wanted to approach my life.
Because what was your thinking at that point then that didn't quite fit with Florida or the people around
I mean,
you?
I always knew I wanted to do something creative, whether it was making videos. And ever since I was super young, I was watching YouTube and stuff. And I was like, there's a way to do life other than this particular route. And that was the thing, is like my family I love, because they always said, you can do whatever you want, but you have to do it this way. And to me, that was kind of like, that was basically just telling me I couldn't do whatever I want, like I want full creative freedom. And so I didn't know what my life was going to be. I didn't know what it was going to manifest as, but I knew that it wasn't going to be going to college, getting a degree, and then finding my 9 to 5 and like having my hobbies, as everyone was calling them, on the weekends. That just wasn't going to work for me. I needed it to be an everyday sort of thing. And that's why like I have so much gratitude for the internet and being able to see different lifestyles. If it wouldn't have been that, if I didn't see other people living the life that I knew I could align with, that I would have just believed it. I would have said, okay, I need to go to school and then I'll get my job as an accountant or whatever it is, and that'll just be my life. And so now it's cool. You can see how so many people do life, and you can see how they're doing it. And so I bounced around. I did a handful of like weird random jobs. My first job was I took yearbook photos of like school kids. And then I would break into the studios on the weekend and like shoot my first portfolio for like fashion, which is like what
literally break in.
I had a key for absolute emergencies, but I was never supposed to be in there unsupervised, and I would always go in on the weekends.
So have you got a criminal record then?
No, it's all good. It's all good. Luckily, I got away scot-free on that one. And sort of like learned initial like photography skills there. And then I got really lucky with a sunglasses company that for some reason had headquartered in my little town in Florida. And they brought me on as their entire creative marketing team. Like it was literally me in a cubicle. I was creating the ads. I was like working on running Facebook ads, everything from start to finish. And then I turned 21, and I think there's like a number of different ages in your life that you could like sort of reach this fork in the road. And so, I remember 21, which is when you can start drinking in the US. I like went out for my birthday with a number of friends, and we were just at this bar, like hanging out, and I looked around and I was like, wow, I'm at a real fork in the road where I need to decide what direction in life I want to take, because the actions I'm doing right now are not getting me to that life I want and that I'm aspiring to. And I was like talking a lot of trash that I was going to do this thing, and my actions weren't matching up to that. And so I kind of walked out that night and changed my entire way I was living. I cut all of my spending. I saved up every single dollar I could to have as much money in the bank, so that at some point when the stars aligned, I could jump and make whatever move I needed to make.
What brought upon that kind of decision, or that kind of tipping point kind of moment?
I could feel myself slipping into the one-track mind of my small town.
Right, okay.
I could tell that I was like, if you don't make your decision quickly and get out of this place, you're going to be like everyone else, and you're just going to get your job and live here forever. And so it was it was like a make it or break it moment. I needed to get out of there quickly. And so started applying to every internship and job that I could find, and VaynerMedia was the only one that called me back.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so they called, and it was all very last minute. They said, "Can you be in New York in 2 weeks?" And I said, "Sure."
To start?
Yeah. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a place to live. I have no family in New York. And I said, "Sure." And somehow I managed to find a very, very sketchy apartment last minute that I couldn't afford, but I packed up everything. I bought a one-way ticket and just left and figured things out. And that first 6 months of being in New York, and I mean, I've never been so on my own before. Luckily now, like I have my whole like friends and everything is like structured in New York, but I knew no one. I had no social following yet. I couldn't reach out and say, who wants to hang out with me? Like I was totally by myself. And that was a scary moment, but also I grew up more in that 6 month period than I ever had before. Learned how to like manage money on my own and do all these things. And I was still trying to like build this whole career on the side. And luckily after a few months there, Gary and I got introduced to each other and got along well. And then it sort of went into the blur of what the next 3.5 years was working with him.
How were you feeling when you bought that one-way ticket then?
It's funny. I've been trying to think about it recently, and it's a feeling I think I've been chasing a lot because it was actually pure calm. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't overly excited. I was doing the thing that there was nothing else in my life that felt right other than moving to New York. And I remember getting off the plane, and I had a friend who went with me who helped me move because I had like extra suitcases and stuff. And I remember just like getting out of the cab in Brooklyn, and I just started walking, and I just felt so comfortable in that environment. And there's nowhere in the world that I've ever naturally felt so comfortable like right out of the gate. And so it was pure calm. Like I just knew that was the decision I needed to be making because it was only going to go one of two ways. I was either going to make it or I was going to go back to the life that I knew. So it was sort of like I wasn't going to lose either way. I think a lot of people look at it as like a big risk, and people want to move to bigger cities or take on a job or leave a job or something and think there's a massive risk that's attached to it. People think that leaving Gary was a massive risk, and I don't. I think a lot of times, even if things don't go the perfect way in your mind you want them to go, it's probably not going to be that bad. If everything falls apart right now, I can go live with my dad. You know what I mean? Like I can go back. I don't think it will, but like, like it's nothing's going to be like life ending. Yeah. Especially like, and that's the thing I think, especially in the creative field, like we should just be having fun. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stress that comes with this job. I work around the clock, and I, am dealing with so many different like fires that I'm trying to address in my life at any given time. But like, this isn't brain surgery. Like I get to like take pictures for a living. And so that's kind of something that like keeps me grounded a lot of times of like, this is still like, if I'm never like not having fun doing my job, I need to change something dramatically because there's no reason that I shouldn't be having a good time every day. Yeah.
I always look back. I was in a call center for about a year and a half straight out of university. And whenever I'm having a bad day, I think back at how awful it was working kind of night shifts, answering like Virgin technical support.
Yeah, I worked. I had a very similar job for like 8 or 9 months where I worked at a Staples. I don't know if you guys have Staples in the UK. I was a box boy, so like I literally just put Post-it notes on the wall every day.
Post-it notes on the wall.
Yeah, like it was just like I would like load up shelves of whatever like office supplies.
Right. Okay.
And then I was like cleaning bathrooms at night and stuff. And so I remember that was like the worst. And I remember like texting my mom. My mom still makes the joke all the time that I was like, yeah, this is a great place to just like watch my dreams die. Like no offense to anyone who works at Staples, but I was so unhappy for that 8-month period. And I have a tattoo up here on my arm that says work harder. And I got it during that time because that was sort of when I was 21 and sort of having all these decisions is when I was working there, and I knew that I needed to like go out and do something different.
So do you use that as leverage then at any point, or did you at that time just to move forwards and move up to where you actually wanted to go?
In what way? As
in, you knew it was so awful.
Oh, yeah.
And so you use that as kind of leverage to go, I've got to change the situation.
Yeah, 100%. Especially because like I think I naturally put a lot of myself into things, and they were going to offer me a promotion to go from office supplies to the tech center, So I was gonna like help on computers. And I remember that moment of being like, oh, I can't level up here. I need to leave. I need to get out of here immediately. Cause I think that's the thing is like people get comfortable. And even though I don't think I would have ever gotten overly comfortable in an office supply store, but yeah, if you're not happy with something, like taking any sort of growth in that situation will be detrimental. It's one of, Gary always says like the golden handcuffs are really scary of getting comfortable in a situation. And then you have the money coming in and things like that. You should be okay with like walking away from anything at any given time.
When did you get on Gary V's radar, and were you playing a long game with him then?
Yeah, it's funny. I had read Gary's first book, Crush It, in 2009 when I was still in high school, and didn't even know who he was. I had just like found the book and I remembered reading it. And then a couple of years later, I was a big fan of Chase Jarvis, which is always cool because now like Chase and I are buddies. Which is like,
when are you doing a course for Creative Life? Come on.
I don't know. At some point. So it's funny.
Has he asked you yet?
We've talked about it. I don't think I'm a good creative teacher.
You'd be great on Creative Life.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm good at talking, and I love talking high level creativity, but I don't think I'm the best person for like technical skills when it comes to like software and things like that. Just because every time that I cross that bridge, I'm like, oh, I actually have to learn like what the real names for things are and stuff like that.
That's when you bring in the guest lecturer, right? Isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
And now the technical person.
Yeah. But Chase had a show called Chase Jarvis Live, which was his sort of like live interview podcast format. And Gary came on there. And I was consciously making the decision that I was going to work for Chase one day until Gary came on Chase's show. And I was like, oh, this Gary guy is interesting. And then I started doing my research.
Well, you just suddenly thought Gary's better.
Yeah, I was like, I like this guy's mentality. And so I have a weird thing of I don't necessarily want to work with people that are in my field to like learn from. Because I think just there's so much information that's like readily available. So Gary to me was interesting because I was like, yeah, like Chase could teach me a lot as a photographer, but Gary can teach me more of a like business distribution aspect, and then I can meet in the middle somewhere. And so I started getting into Gary's whole world, started following really closely, and then that's how I actually found out about like VaynerMedia itself and got the internship. And it was way a longer game. The idea initially was get an internship at Vayner, turn that internship into like a real full-time job. And then in like 3 years, I'll figure out how to work with Gary. And
so you'd already visualized this in your head then?
Yeah. I knew that was the goal, but I didn't think it was going to happen that quickly. I thought it was going to take a really long time, and I was going to have to get really invested into like VaynerMedia's ecosystem. And then I got an email at the end of my internship that basically said I was fired. They were like, yeah, like we don't have a job for you. So,
really?
So next Friday is your last day. And I was like, the whole plan is ruined.
How long was the internship then?
Like 2 or 3 months, something like that. Yeah. And then I emailed Gary and asked for a meeting. I was like, hey, like I came to work here and I wanted to work with you. It's not going to work out that way, but just wanted to say bye. And he said, yeah, come by. And then there's the famous Uber ride that I talk about of, that meeting got canceled. I ended up in the car with Gary, and I went from my last week as an intern to the next week I was on Gary's team.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't know that story, how did that all come about then?
Yeah. I always have the joke with Gary's assistant, Tyler, that he could have like single-handedly not let my career happen. But Gary's schedule was just overly packed. He was going to be leaving New York the next day to go travel. And by the time he would have gotten back, he would have been gone, and like I would have been gone, and that would have been it. And so I was kind of like, yo, please, there's something we can do. How can we make this happen? And Gary was like, it's cool. Like, just come like ride in this cab with me. He was going uptown to a meeting. And so luckily we got stuck in crazy Manhattan rush hour traffic. And our 5-minute meeting turned into about an hour-long meeting in the car that I was not prepared for whatsoever. I had my 5-minute meeting dialed, which is actually super funny. Because in my 5-minute meeting, I really genuinely was just going to say bye.
Yeah, okay.
But then whenever we got in the cab together, I was like, I have a weird opportunity here. And I literally was just like, I want to work for you. How can we make this happen? And he sort of grilled me for the next hour on like what I wanted to do. And it's funny because when I watch the footage back, one, you can tell I'm so nervous. I'm like shaking. I have no idea how to talk to another human. And everything he's asking me, I don't have a real answers for. So I don't know what he like saw in me to give me that shot. But he asked me to basically like, he was like, all right, get out of the cab, go make content and email it to me. And so I went and I made a handful of Instagram like quote cards, which used to be like the thing he posted every day. And then I remember the next day I got an email from HR. They were like, hey, we need you to come in for a meeting. And I assumed this was just the like, give
You're
us your
properly
badge
fired.
back. Like, this is it. And they were like, cool. So you're going to be starting on Gary's team tomorrow. Like, here's what you need for that. And then the whole Gary thing was on a 1 month basis. So Gary was basically like, you have a month to prove yourself. Either you're done after that or we'll figure out something else. And I think it was 2 weeks into that, Gary pulled me into his office and said, cool, like you're here full time.
Nice. That's quite a nice thing to hear. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
It wasn't too bad.
So tell us about your time with Gary then, because it must have been pretty intense.
Yeah, it was very intense. And the thing that was really crazy is so my internship at VaynerMedia was as a designer. I was doing graphic design work, and I hadn't really been doing any video for the last year, almost 2 years at that time. And whenever I was in the HR meeting, they were like, cool, you're going to Gary's team as a graphic designer. And I showed up the first day, and Gary was like, oh, this is our new videographer.
Oh,
and
really?
I was like, that's not what I do. And so the first 6 months was like a pretty insane crash course. Like, didn't sleep, watched every tutorial I could because I had to learn Premiere from like the ground up essentially. And luckily, like I had been a photographer, so I was very like familiar with cameras and things like that. And that shift to video is pretty easy. And then now video is like my baby. It's like all I kind of think about and do for the most part, at least.
So were you kind of like shifted down to video then, almost like a pathway that?
Yeah. It was kind of decided for me. At least to the scale. I was always doing design work throughout my entire time with Gary, just because it was a skill set that we utilized. And for the most part, I mean, Gary's team is massive now, but in the early days, it was only a few of us, and so everyone kind of had to have like a lot of different jobs. And so I was doing a lot of design work at the time. But yeah, I was like shoved down the video route. And so I dove in head first, edited as many videos as I could, like multiple videos a day, just going through and just editing all day long. I lived my life in Premiere. There's this inside joke between myself, D-Rock and Andy, and Tyler, who were like the four core people originally, to where I was so invested in like the editing phase that I moved my computer into a closet. Into like a really, really small conference room. And I took that over. That was like my editing suite office. And I got so pale, and I'm very pale as it is, but I was so pale that I got the nickname of Ghost. Like I was the ghost editor, because I just stayed in this room for like 20 hours a day, editing all day long and trying to become the best editor that I could. It was one of my favorite pieces of advice that Andy Kranak, who's Gary's brand director, gave me is, whenever I was in the early stages of video, like learning video on Gary's team specifically, he was like, I wanted to learn other things. And so I was like, can I learn Facebook ads? Can I learn this? Can I learn that? Like, I want to experiment in the company. He's like, the only thing that should be on your mind right now is becoming as dangerous as you can as a video editor. He's like, just become the best in the building. And that was the only thing I wanted to do. And so that's what I poured all of my energy into, was becoming the best video person that I could.
So when did you move over and sort of stop doing a bit more kind of video into doing other stuff within VaynerMedia then? Yeah,
it was always video and things like that were still attached to it in a lot of ways. I think the first project is whenever Gary's K-Swiss first shoe came out, and that collaboration was happening. And one of the contingencies on that sneaker was that VaynerMedia was going to produce K-Swiss's summer campaign around entrepreneurship and all the collection of shoes that were coming out. The VaynerMedia producing the campaign, though, just meant I was going to make the entire thing. And so I basically took a 2-month break from Gary's stuff and created an entire shoe campaign by myself, which was spending a lot of time in LA. I filmed like 4 mini documentaries on entrepreneurs, did a whole bunch of photo shoots, designed all of the advertisements, and basically like myself created hundreds of pieces of content around these sneakers. And so that was like, I think the first time where Gary saw that like my skill set was a little different and that I could kind of bounce around and do other things. And then quickly after that, I got a random text message at about 10 o'clock and he said, hey, I need a cover for Crushing It. Do you want to make it? I said, sure. And so literally I remember the night that I was like about to leave and go home, he texted me and I sat back down at my desk and like opened up a Photoshop document, and that was version 2 of the designs.
Really?
And luckily that was the one that actually ended up making it all the way through.
Because this has sold millions of copies around the world. I mean,
Done pretty well. It was #1 New York Times business book.
how does it feel knowing that that's something that you created that's in millions of people's hands?
For a while, I don't think I understood it. It was kind of it was like cool. And I remember whenever we got the rough drafts, it was super exciting when the hardcovers, like my name's in the last page of like, designed by Tyler Babin. And that was like really cool. The moment it actually hit me though, is whenever I was in India for my friend's wedding and I was in the Mumbai airport and I walked into it and saw the cover, like on a poster, like in the bookstore in the airport. And that was a moment of like, wow, something that I opened up a blank canvas in Photoshop one night, like threw this together, and now it's on a poster on the other side of the world. Was a pretty surreal feeling. And it's a piece of work that I'm very proud of. And it's funny because like from a design perspective, there's a million things I would change from it now. I wanted to make it specific to the moment. So the color yellow is matched to, at the time, what Amazon's color yellow was, because I wanted it to just be catchy. Like if you saw it on a bookshelf, Gary's name is in a bubble that is the shape of an Instagram tag, having the Instagram story thing around it. Like it was very much designed and stapled in time because of those things I applied to it. So now it's funny looking at it. I'm like, oh, there's so many things I would want to change. And it's funny looking at, at the time Snapchat was important. So we put Snapchat on the front, and like Snapchat doesn't really exist anymore, And so everything's changed so much, but it's really fulfilling and rewarding to still like walk into a random bookstore and see it.
What percentage happy were you when you sent that off to the printers then?
Again, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe halfway, maybe 60%. I remember,
60%.
Like there's cool things and there's lots of like hidden things. So like the text that is sort of faded in the background is the opening passage of Gary's first book, Crush It. So there's lots of like little hidden things, and to me that was exciting. I wanted it to be like an Easter egg book. So I was happy with it, but it was also immediately when it was done, it was like, cool, what's the next thing? That's just me.
So yeah, is that the sort of thing that you're most proud of in your time with Gary Vee then?
It's definitely up there. It's a good question. I think I still randomly, while I was in London last week, I had dinner with a YouTuber here who had reached out, and he said, look, I've been following you and Gary this whole time, and now he has like a really successful YouTube and Instagram, and he's making a really great living off just making videos that he wants to make, and that's like all he's doing. And seeing how grateful he was is to like, watching everything we were doing, and he applied it to himself and got to blow up and like do his thing. That's the thing I'm probably most proud of, because whenever you're in the process of, making hundreds of videos and pieces of content, you really get into the flow of like, yeah, I'm just making this because it's going to go on Instagram and that's it. And you forget all the people it's impacting on the other side. And so anytime someone says that like they're living the life they want to live now because of a video that I edited 2 years ago, those are the moments that make me most proud.
So what is the person that you want to become, and what's your?
Oh man,
because it sounds like you've been on this kind of year of discovery.
Yeah.
So who's the person you want to become?
It's a good question, and I definitely have the visual in my head. I don't know how to articulate it into words, and so there's a talk, I forget who did the talk, but he's like, the person who my hero is like whoever I am in 10 years. And I think that's it. Like, I know at least I have an idea of who I would like to be in 5-10 years from now. And if I can get even close to that, I think I'll be happy and will have made a good impact on the world. But also I'm so in the moment that I can't tell you how it'll go. Like I could walk out of this interview right now and something could like impact my life and completely shift everything. My thing is I'm super open and willing to do that. I never want to be so fixated on a goal that I don't allow the things happening in my actual life around me right now to have an impact.
So do you think you found your purpose, or you're getting closer to your purpose?
I'm getting closer to my purpose as it stands right now. I think that my purpose will definitely change and adapt over the years and different projects that I'm working on. But I, for the first time, think that even though maybe the quality of the videos isn't where I want it to be, I think the message behind the videos is really aligned with what's going on in my head and like in my heart at this moment. And so for me, like that is fulfilling and makes me feel like I'm moving in the right direction to becoming that person I want to be in 5 or 10 years.
What's going on in your heart then for you at the moment?
For me, it's getting back to the core of creating things because I love to create them. You know, no matter how aware you are of what you're doing, it's really easy to fall into the trap of doing things for the audience. And I never want to do that. And it was a trap, especially early on in the residency, that happened is that I had a few videos that did really well, and I garnered like a big audience around like my YouTube channel and things like that. And immediately I stopped thinking about what I wanted to create for myself. And I started thinking, okay, what's going to satisfy this audience? And that was a mistake. And it's definitely something that I feel like veered me off course for a period of time. And so realigning with that and saying, look, maybe the next 100 videos I make, no one likes. And if that's the case, that's unfortunate. But as long as I like them, eventually there will be an audience around that. And that's what's going on in my heart. And that's the thing I'm trying to push onto other people and other creators, is that pursuing the thing that's going to make you the happiest inside, regardless if there's an audience right there. You know, if it's not there now, it might be there one day. That's enough. I sort of think of it as like building out a content library. So you know how if you find a new musician and you're like, oh, I love this, and then you look back and they've made 10 albums, you're like, this is so much great content.
Yeah.
I can like, that's kind of the way I view what I'm doing right now. Is I'm okay if none of the videos and things I do like pop and make me like YouTube famous or whatever right now. I'm building the library so that in 10 years when someone stumbles across a piece of work, they can go back and watch all the videos that led up to the thing they watched.
What does success mean to you?
It's a heavy one. And it's changed a lot. I used to always say like, I just wanted to be happy. And I realized that's a little too, like I have to like add some context there. So for me, it's having the freedom and flexibility to pursue whatever idea I want at that time. Like that's success to me. I never want to be too locked in to certain things. Because I don't think it allows a lot of flexibility. And that's what I want in my life, I think, more than anything, is flexibility. So if the phone rings right now and there's some kind of cool project happening somewhere in the world, for me to be able to drop everything and go do that is the thing that matters to me. And if I set my life up in a way where I can do that and I can pursue the things I want to do and can get the messages across that matter to me, then I think I've made myself a success at that point.
Now, Gary Vee's quite big on kindness, particularly at this moment. I run a kindness project. We make good happen. So I try and instill that and gently infuse all the kind of creativity and the content I put out with a sort of little smidgen of kindness. What's the sort of kindest thing that you've done for someone, or the kindest thing that you've seen someone else do?
The kindest thing I think I've done for people, I do my best, even though like my schedule is busy, to make myself really available for anyone going through like some sort of struggle. So I'm always happy to like jump on the phone with creators that might follow me or reach out or something like that. Sometimes it takes a while to make that happen, just given, you know, travel and things like that. But I always want to do the thing that I wish I could have done whenever I was, you know, a younger creator, like trying to figure it out. Like if I could have called up sort of one of my heroes and been like, hey, what should I do in this moment? That's, you know, that's what I want to be able to impart. And then, I mean, I guess to bring it home to Gary, I think the thing about kindness that is cool for Gary is it's such a small thing. The way you talk to people on the street and stuff like that really matters. And, you know, we're in London, like I live in New York, and when you're in like really dense urban environments, people tend to be a lot more like short tempered and like snippety and things like that. But I've even noticed like in my time here, just the way someone like talks to you, if you're in a shop or you're at a restaurant or something like that, has such a profound impact on your day and the way you start treating other people. And like, why not just be like nice to people? You know, like what's wrong with that? Have a little bit more like positive energy in the world. It's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Now I read that you said that you want to get people to feel less intimidated about following their dreams.
Yeah.
How can you do that, or how can people feel less intimidated?
I think that kind of wraps back around to the idea of risk. In that I think there's this mentality of like, okay, if I go like chase this thing and it doesn't go well, I'm going to lose it all. And that's the thing that's most intimidating. And I always kind of flip it of like, instead of thinking about what you might lose if it doesn't go well, think about what you might gain if it actually works. You know, if I would have I can't even imagine what my life would have been if I hadn't had bought that one-way ticket to New York 4 years ago. Everything's so different and I've gained so much. But I think if all I did was focus on if I went to New York and failed, like people would have laughed at me, like it wouldn't have changed much of my life. Like everything would have been kind of the same. And so why not give yourself an opportunity to gain so much, you know, whenever a lot of times, and look, everyone's situation's different and I don't want to impart any like privilege that I have onto someone who's in a worse situation. But the idea that you can go after pretty much anything you want to do, and especially if, you know, you're young to have that flexibility, why not just go for it and just try it? Because sure, things could go wrong, but a lot of things can go right also. And it tastes a lot better on the other side of the right if you actually pursue that.
So before the last question then, where can people find you online?
Pretty much anywhere. Just search Babin, and now it pretty much ranks. If you want to get stuff in front of me, Twitter is the best place. I'm spending a lot of time on Twitter, and I'll definitely see it if you hit me on Twitter. It's just Tyler_Babin. Instagram is a little bit more chaotic. I'll often miss Instagram DMs and things like that. And my email is a complete mess. I do my best to stay on top of it, but it's a disaster. So Twitter is probably the best place if you really want to get in touch with me quickly. But I'm on everything.
Nice. Yeah, I use Twitter. People kind of talk down Twitter, but actually
Twitter's the best.
It's really effective now because so many people have gone to something like Instagram.
Yeah.
That's easier to connect with people, I think.
Yeah, like I probably, I don't know. I would say like Twitter is definitely my second most used platform, if not the first. I spend a lot of time on Twitter. It's like the best place to reach out to people. And Gary will say it too, of like, if you tweet at Gary, he's definitely going to see it. He might not be able to respond to it in the moment, but I will 100% see it if you tweet it to me.
I like it. Right, so last question then.
Yep.
Imagine you're in a lovely location, maybe a beach, and you've got all your friends and family and your loved ones on the beach.
Yep.
You've hired one of those small planes that carries the little message behind it.
Yeah.
And these are your kind of final words of wisdom. What would you have on it?
That is such a good ending question. And it made me laugh because if my friends were in this room, they would all say that I would just have let's go, because I say that way too often. I'm always like trying to get everyone hyped, and we always are just like, let's go. But oh man, this is good.
You could have two planes. You could have let's go on the first one.
It's definitely all right. So the first
that's
plane's
cheap,
going to go
'cause
by.
that's quite cheap,
let's go.
isn't
That's
it?
short. It's not that many letters. I think the thing that would probably go on the second one is like chase whatever's keeping you up at night. So I very, very rarely have a hard time sleeping. I normally like pass out as soon as my head hits the pillow. And I've often always equated that to I very actively feel like I'm chasing the things I want and I'm doing those. And so I'm living it in real life. I don't need to like spend any time laying in bed thinking about it. And I've noticed that on the rare occasion I do have a hard time falling asleep at night, I try to really understand what's doing that thing, what's keeping me awake at night. And then I put all of my energy in real life the next day into like pursuing that. And so that's always my kind of thing, is that I think if you're sleeping well at night, then you're chasing everything you really want, because that's if there's any time that the voice in your head pops up trying to make you rethink things or overthink things, it's that. And so that for me is one of the best barometers in my life, is to the things I'm thinking about as I'm going to sleep. And if it's keeping me up, I need to chase it in real life.
I like it.
Yeah.
Babin, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming
Absolutely,
here
man.
in London.
Stoked we got to do this.
Flying off to New York pretty straight after this, almost.
Back to New York for a full 12 hours before going straight back to the airport.
Well, we really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Babin.
Thank you.
Hooray!
Woo. This was good. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I
Really
like
good
that. It's nice
conversation.
going a little bit deep in places and stuff like that.
Love that.